Hello again, and welcome to the King County Solid Waste 2023 Organics Regional Stakeholder Meeting. If you had just joined us, I welcome you to introduce yourself by putting your name, title, and organization in the chat, and to update your name on Zoom with the three dots at the top of your video with name, organization, and preferred pronouns. As you all should have just gotten a notification, this meeting is being recorded. That recording will be uploaded onto a King County webpage, which we will share in the coming days. Before we move on, I just want to introduce myself really quickly. My name is Kelsey Bailey, and I am the Organics Circular Economy Program Manager at King County Solid Waste. We've had this variation of this meeting since 2019, and we're so thrilled to have all of you here. So next slide, please. So before we dive into today's agenda, I wanted to go over some meeting reminders. Again, this meeting is being recorded. That is up to you then if you would like to have your video on or off throughout this meeting. As I also mentioned, please update your name on screen by using the three dots at the top of your video. And then just some housekeeping of that. We will have 2 Q&A sessions throughout today's meeting. So as we're going through presentations, save your questions for those designated sessions. Each should be around 15 minutes. And when doing so, we're doing some direction to either raise your hand and unmute when you're called upon, or you are also welcome to drop questions in the chat. Those that we're not able to answer during the designated time will be recorded, and we'll provide answers to those questions to all attendees in the follow-up email. And then lastly, if you have an additional question that you have not had a chance to ask, there will be a follow-up survey in which you can input those questions as well. Great. So next slide, please. We have a packed agenda today. Everyone here should have gotten an updated agenda about 30 minutes or so ago, but I'll run through this quickly to introduce myself again. My name is Kelsey Bailey. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Organic Circular Economy Program Manager at King County Solid Waste. I want to thank you all again for being here and emphasize a huge thank you to our many presenters that I will run through really quickly, who are here to share some of the amazing work that they are doing in the King County area. So first, we're going to kick off part 1 with some updates from quite a few folks from King County that will be presenting on an array of projects in organics. Then we will hear from Allie at the Washington Department of Ecology, who will be presenting on the implementation of the 2022 Organics Management Law. Heather then will follow up from Zero Waste Washington to give us a 2024 legislation preview. And then Liz from City of Seattle will be talking about food waste prevention and food rescue. So after that section, we will take that 15-minute Q&A. And then following that, we will have a 10-minute break. Next slide, please. So after the break, everyone got some water, stretched their legs. We will come back for part 2, and we will hear from speakers and organizations hosting a variety of projects in our greater King County community. Safira from Wasat is going to be presenting on the expansion of their Neighborly Needs program into South King County, which aims to take surplus food, have it prepared by chefs, and provide meals to the community. Bobby from Chomp will be speaking about their anaerobic digestion pilot on Vashon Island. And then Jessica and Christina from Food Cycle Science will speak or provide some updates on the countertop food scrap unit pilot that they are hosting in King County. And then Joy from Elk Run Farm will be presenting on the farm itself, its history, mission, and its compost journey. And then we'll wrap it up with Roma Jean from Feed 7 Generations, who will speak about feed and its many programs centered on Indigenous food systems and sovereignty. We will then end this section with our second and last 15-minute Q&A, and then have some closing remarks before we part. Next slide, please. So before we transition to our speakers, I just want to take a moment to pause for a grounding moment to think of the land in which we serve and serves us. Nothing ties us closer to the land than the food and plants we grow and consume. In the organic sphere, we have a responsibility to take care of the land and resources it produces, and we have an even greater responsibility to the original stewards of this land, the Duwamish, Muckleshoot, Snoqualmie, Puyallup, Tulalip, and Suquamish tribes. There is immense work to be done to undo past wrongs that force these groups from their ancestral land and diminish their ability to grow and nourish themselves with traditional foods. So as we move forward, let us remember why we do this work: to not only conserve the land and resources, but to also honor and center the past and present stewards of the land and the stewards yet to come. All right, and then next slide, please. And so now to kick off our King County updates, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Eliza Krasinski.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eliza Krasinski. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm part of King County's solid waste division on our organics team. Next slide, please. I'll start by setting the stage with some data in regards to organics material and processing. These figures here are taken from an infographic that we update every year. And we estimate in 2022 that King County businesses and residents generated over 500,000 tons of organics materials. That includes yard waste, food waste, and compostable paper and plastics. We estimated that almost half, about 48%, is collected and sent for processing. That's about 5% more than our 2021 estimate, though we still have a lot of ground to cover to reach our zero waste of resources by 2030 goal here at King County. Disposal estimates have been updated from previous years as well, with 2022 waste characterization study data that was just wrapped up these past few months. Next slide, please. Looking at processing, this is likely a familiar image for some of you here today. For planning purposes, here at King County, we review the permitted capacity and reported inbound tons from Ecology's facility reports, so we have a better understanding of where our regional organics processing capacity is at, especially with new policies like HB 1799, aka the Organics Management Law, that will continue to drive more diversion of material. So the facilities we look at include Cedar Grove, Maple Valley, Cedar Grove, Everett, and Lens Enterprises. Though I do want to recognize that there are smaller facilities operating in our region, such as Bailey's Compost up in Snohomish County. Our current estimate based on 2022 facility reports is that these composting facilities serving Seattle, King, and Snohomish counties are at 68% of permitted capacity. Last year at this time, we were at 78% capacity, and this 10% change is largely due to Lens Enterprises acquiring a permit to effectively double their capacity from 75,000 tons to 150,000 tons. Next slide, please. So other activities related to material and processing, the county's doing other work to support collection, such as we recently completed a 2-phase organics processing feasibility study on Vashon Island. And we continue to explore co-digestion and mixed waste processing found in our RE+ plan initiatives. And if you have questions specific to these pieces right here, I can refer you to other project managers for more details. That's all I have for my section here today. I will pass it back off to Kelsey Bailey. Thank you.
Next slide, please, Sam. Awesome. Hello again. Thanks, Eliza. So In addition to the work here done at King County Solid Waste, I wanted to emphasize some of our organics programming. One in particular is our Compost Wise program. It is a program that serves as a knowledge center and resource for technical assistance in the benefits, uses, and applications of compost. If you go to our webpage, which I can share on the chat after my section, you can find some online guides about compost. You can find our compost procurement calculator, some reference videos. Local jurisdictions can have access to our universal compost contract. We are working on some model contract language for construction contracts. And then we are also soon launching our on-call technical assistance for King County agencies and cities. I'll have a little bit more about this program on the next slide, but if you have any questions as I go through this, please feel free to reach out to compost@kingcounty.gov. Next slide, please. So some current, more newer updates that we have going on is that for those who remember or maybe new, my predecessors had hosted a compost roadshow and training program series. And we are relaunching that, which we are very excited to do, which is very exciting in timing with the 2022 Organics Management Law implementation. This roadshow and training sessions cover the benefits of compost and then provide directions, examples, and uses of compost. And then we will also be including additions on that procurement and reporting requirements that come from the 2022 Organics Management Law. In addition to that, like I already stated, we are working on developing some compost specification language for King County contracts to use, and we are continuing to support agricultural and restoration projects here in King County. And again, any questions on this, feel free to reach out to compost@kingcounty.gov. Next slide, please. And then lastly, before I pass it off, I wanted to give a quick update on the implementation of the 2022 Organics Management Law from the King County side. I have a great team of coworkers who've been really helpful in this, and just want to highlight some of that work. So myself, I have been working with our green buildings team to build system and processes to meet our compost procurement requirements. Again, emphasizing that we are working on developing a uniform compost specification language. We are going to be planning on integrating the metrics for the reporting requirements into our sustainable infrastructure scorecard reporting system. And then once these systems are more set in place, we will also be recording and providing some trainings to our county program managers. And then Eliza, who you just heard from, has been amazing at leading our commercial organics technical assistance work. And an update on that front is that she and the team are currently meeting with partners to inform and create complementary designs of commercial technical assistance, and then working on some program outreach aimed towards the business organics management areas, are also known as BOMAs, which the BOMAs in the King County area are on your slide. And then our colleague Hannah is representing King County by participating at the Organics Management Law Part 2 workshops for the 2024 legislative session. All right, thank you. Next slide. And I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Rick.
Thanks, Kelsey. I'm going to talk a little bit about our partnership with the Solid Waste Division and how we found ways to incorporate compost into some of our King County-owned farms. So just to give you a little bit of a primer, the county owns approximately a little over 200 acres of farmland scattered throughout King County. Most of that farmland is rented to minority tenants that grow fruits and vegetables for marketing, farmers markets, a little bit of subsistence, that type of thing. And we've been working with, oh my goodness, the Solid Waste Division, I think now for close to probably at least 7 or 8 years on ways to try to extol the virtues of compost and make the connection with commercial compost and farms. And there's a big market opportunity out there on farms. Most farmers understand the value of adding organics. with climate change, improving carbon soil in the carbon soil, those types of things, it's particularly important. So we've been working with solid waste on that, and I'll talk a little bit today about our project at one of our farms that we're doing. Next slide, please. All right, so as I said, we do have a number of farms. The farm that I'm going to be talking about today is what we call our Horseneck Farm, and it is in the Kent Valley in the Lower Green Agriculture Production District, kind of nestled between the Green River and Highway 167, kind of in that area. The farmland that you see just north of Emerald Downs is actually unincorporated King County and a lot of preserved farmland. Next slide, please. All right, so in particular, a lot of our King County owned farms, because they've been rented for a number of years or used by tenants that didn't have the ability to make improvements, a lot of our soils have really low organic percentages. In fact, our Horseneck Farm was just a smidge above 0, which for farmland in King County is pretty darn low. And even though the texture of the soil is pretty good, when there's low organic matter, we end up with, when that soil gets wet, it dries and turns to cement. So it's incredibly hard to till, hard to get plants to germinate, that type of thing. Next slide. All right, so one of the solutions was to add compost. We obviously don't have livestock on these farms that are generating manure or organic material. So the Solid Waste Division said, hey, through our equity and social justice work, we've got a little bit of funding. Let's do a 2-year pilot project and let's bring some commercial compost on site. What you're seeing on there is cottonwood fluff. That is actually not mold, that's cottonwood fluff. This farm happens to be surrounded by a lot of cottonwoods. Next slide, please. So obviously we get compost, it's delivered, great. Application is a challenge. We've got 20+ acres. Delivering it by wheelbarrow or even tractor bucket is really slow. And this is the way we had been doing it, but not terribly efficient or effective. Next slide, please. All right, so we applied for a grant to get a manure spreader from the State Conservation Commission. We were blessed to be awarded that grant, and what you see is the first operation of that shiny new manure spreader, which is great. We're still learning. There are some limitations about when we can spread, both from an environmental perspective, but also just from a soil management perspective. If it's too wet, we can compact the soil. We want to be careful of that, but it works well. We thought we'd need a second tractor. We've got it down to where we can use our single tractor and get it flipped pretty quickly. Next slide, please. All right, just a quick thanks to the Solid Waste Division for their financial support, the State Conservation Commission for the grant for the manure spreader, and obviously Cedar Grove for supplying the compost. Just one quick thing that I will add about, as we're trying to build the market for compost, there are 3 limitations with compost. There are the cost of compost, there's the application challenges. A lot of our small farms don't have the equipment to spread. And then we still hear a fair amount about plastics concerns. And I've been to the Cedar Grove facility, and they are working their tails off to try to get plastics out. But we've actually had a few of our tenant farmers decline free compost. And one of the concerns is they're concerned about some of the plastics contamination. So I think just for those of you that work in that realm, continuing to try to work on that is something important. I think that will expand some of the market opportunity. And I believe I'm close to my time. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. And then we are going to transition over to Brian.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Lund with King County Parks, and I'm the Restoration Program Manager. Next slide, please. King County Parks manages over 180,000 acres of open space. We own 33,000 acres in fee and 150,000 acres of conservation easement. And in my role as Restoration Program Manager, we work to enhance ecological function across all of these open spaces. This picture you see in the background is Bass Lake Complex down near Enumclaw. It was a very degraded site. They had scraped off all of the topsoil, and a lot of noxious plant communities moved in. Sulfur cinquefoil and Scots broom were a couple of the big ones we had out there. And just so if you don't know, sulfur cinquefoil is a listed noxious weed, so we're required by law to control it. It was hard to establish vegetation here due to the lack of organic matter. So I've been working with solid waste to import some organic matter in the form of compost. This project here, we put compost rings around the conifers you see out in this field, and we're trying to establish a shade canopy, which will help outcompete a lot of this noxious stuff, since most noxious vegetation does not like shade. Next slide, please. This picture here is at Merrimore Park. It's the Audubon bird loop. And in this area, they've identified over 180 species of birds. A lot of the stuff you're looking at there, it's non-native grass community primarily, and there is a lot of there's non-native hawthorn out here and tansy ragwort. So since we're trying to reestablish this meadow community, a lot of these meadow plants aren't very competitive, so site prep is pretty dang important. So in fall of 2020, we spread 100 acres of a medium compost over around 5,000 square feet in this meadow, and covered in a woven ground cover for about 18 months. And go ahead, next slide. So we used a Northwest Prairie mix in that the pilot area. It was comprised of 18 grass and forb species, and the objective out of this mix is to have a perpetual bloom, so we can promote all the pollinator species throughout the year, and hopefully increase that number of bird sightings beyond 180. A couple of the ones you're looking at here are globegilia and western yarrow. Next slide, please. This project here is also near the Merrimore Audubon bird loop. You kind of look to the left there, you see some storage bins where the Merrimore crew keeps a lot of the materials on site. And it was a bit of an eyesore because you can see the road on the right. It's the main road through Merrimore Park. And so the view shed on the main road through Merrimore Park was of all of these storage bins. And so we brought in some imported fill that was very low in organic matter, and we mixed it with compost, and we planted shrubs and grasses and forbs here as well. Next slide. So this was planted in February of 23, and you see here we used a lot more shrubs than over there in the bird loop. And once again, the primary objective is to provide pollinator habitat. We also want to block the view shed of the storage area, but we also don't want to block the distant views across the park, because Mount Rainier is to the south. And so if we plant a lot of taller species, you're going to completely ruin the view shed. So we were trying to do some medium height vegetation that won't completely block the view shed. We threw a few Gary oaks in here because they should work well in this type of environment. Next slide, please. So here's another pretty neat one. This one here is out on Vashon Island, and this is Island Center Forest. This is called the Borrow Pit at Island Center Forest. There's a solid waste transfer station just in the background there, and all of this material was removed to cap a landfill about 15 years ago. And due to the removal of all of the topsoil, it was very hard to get anything growing out here at all. So some of my coworkers and I came up with the idea to create songbird habitat mounds. What you're looking at here is there's 11 completed mounds. You see one in progress in the background there. It's very compacted material down below, and so you can kind of see the grayish area in that one mound in the background, and it's clay soils. So we went in there with an excavator and broke up the clay soils 2 feet deep and brought in 30 yards of compost for each of these mounds, and planted them with shrubs and grasses and forbs. That was last year's project. And this year we currently have 800 yards on site, and we're going to create another 14 mounds that are going to be 40 yards per mound. Next slide. Like the last one at Merrimore Park I was showing you, we went in with the woven ground cover for prep prior to plant installation. This one here, we covered these mounds with a woven ground cover prior to planting. So we cut X's into this woven ground cover, and we're planting into this during the establishment of the native plant community, and it will be removed once we have good establishment from those plant communities. So there's some Gary oaks here as well, and you notice the surrounding forest, it's all Douglas fir, because this is a commercial forest in the past, and so post-harvest they went in and revegetated it with whatever the most commercially valuable tree at the time was, which is Douglas fir. So there isn't a lot of diversity or complexity in this system. So one of the primary objectives was to increase the species richness. Next slide. So there's a couple of my collaborators out there shortly after we planted. That is in March of this year, and the plant's taken off pretty well. You can see we installed 570 plants in these mounds this year, and actually they're installed in November of 22. And we're ramping up to create these 14 mounds and install another 1,100 plants in those mounds. We're actually creating those mounds this next week. Next slide. All right, thank you so much. I know I kind of blasted through that, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And yeah, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Brian. And a quick note, everyone's contact information will be sent out as well. So extra things can be sent out then. Okay, we will move on to our next speaker, Allie from, oh, I'm sorry. We are moving on to Mike Lufkin. I apologize. From the South Seattle Community Food Hub. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Kelsey. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Lufkin. I work for King County, and I manage a program called the Local Food Initiative. For those that, Brian, I think you're not on mute, Brian. Thanks. For those that don't know, the Local Food Initiative is our regional policy roadmap for how we're trying to achieve two goals: how we want to grow the local food and farm economy, and how we want to increase access to healthy, nutritious foods in low-income communities. So I'm really excited to be here this afternoon to share with you a little bit about this South Seattle Community Food Hub project. And really, while I'm honored to be here, and I see that this presentation is under a King County project, I want to note that this really is a community-led and community-driven project. The county, supported the project at the outset, but from here, the project really is community-led and community-supported. And I'm excited about this for a couple of reasons, and hopefully you'll see some of this in the next few minutes of my presentation. It's because the project touches on so many different important policy goals. It has community development involved, food security, economic development, healthy communities, equity, and of course, waste reduction as well. So what I want to do in the next couple minutes is just tell you a little bit about the project background and how we got here, share some about some of the project objectives and the details around that, and then just end with how it's being developed and the timeline. So next slide, please. So I want to start out just to note that this project has been kind of a long time in development. We've been working on and known about the need for what we call kind of right-sized food system infrastructure for quite a number of years. I mean, there's been reports and studies and analyses and surveys telling us about the need across the food system for right-sized infrastructure. So when I say right-sized infrastructure, you might ask, well, what do you mean by that? Well, for the hunger relief sector, that can mean things like cold storage, freezer space, aggregation and packing space, distribution support, as well as processing infrastructure to triage food so that it can be turned into either frozen or shelf-stable products. Kind of on the farmer side, it's a similar story. Many of the farmers across the region, they lack the cold storage, the aggregation space, and the distribution spaces that oftentimes is a limiting factor to their ability to sell into different markets. And when I say they lack access, I mean that sometimes access can be on two different levels. There's, geographic access. Is it in a place? Is this storage in a place, or cold storage or aggregation space in a place that is readily geographically accessible, but also financially accessible is a really important aspect of this as well, that I just wanted to point out. And then the last piece is, we lack the infrastructure oftentimes to create the equitable food system that we have and want to create. And what I mean by that is connecting growers from across the region to communities that often don't have access, communities and residents who often don't have access to the fresh local food that's grown across this region. Next slide, please. So as I said, the county's, we've been thinking about this as well as many, many other organizations across the region for years. And, in about beginning of 2019, we realized, look, there's been enough needs analyses and studies done around need. If we're going to facilitate and support overcoming this barrier and helping to address this challenge, we need to move beyond a needs analysis and create a vision for what this could look like, what a multi-purpose shared use food facility, how that could be developed for addressing the needs of these organizations that I've identified. So we hired some consultants, Echo Northwest, back in 2019, and they produced 2 reports for us. One was the creation of what we call an opportunities report, which, as mentioned, it identified, well, what are the opportunities, the benefits that a shared use facility could provide to these different stakeholders across the region. And then a business concept report that looked at, well, what are the different issues that would have to be addressed to actually develop a facility of this nature. Next slide, please. So, we concluded that feasibility study, and that was right at the height of the pandemic when it was concluded. We spent some time working with the advisory committee trying to find a possible location for the facility. After looking for close to a year and striking out a number of times at possible sites, in the summer of 2021, we were approached by Food Lifeline. This picture here is a picture of the Food Lifeline headquarters in the South Park neighborhood of Seattle. Food Lifeline came forward and said they'd heard about the efforts of this stakeholder group that had been meeting around this facility concept. And we entered into a partnership to develop an adjacent building that's owned by Food Lifeline. The building itself is 80,000 square feet. And they had agreed to allow for the use of half of the building, so 40,000 square feet, for the South Seattle Community Food Hub. So, some of the elements that came out of those initial feasibility studies and some of the conversations with the stakeholders that were involved were around integrating cold and freezer storage into this facility, aggregation and dry pack space, commercial kitchen, and importantly, communal spaces and meeting spaces. And that a core function of the space would be to serve as a connection between hunger relief organizations and regional farm businesses. And we were really fortunate with this connection and partnership with Food Lifeline for a whole host of reasons, but not least of which is having a relatively new facility from which to start conceptualizing what this food hub could look like, and a facility that has quite a bit of the infrastructure, like the loading docks and things like that, that are going to be necessary for the build out. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of the interior of that warehouse, and as you can see, it's a wonderfully large space, offering a canvas for to do a lot in terms of meeting these needs. What are some of the objectives of the project? Well, as I stated, we're trying to increase the capacity, resiliency, and collaboration between the hunger relief agencies and farmers across the region through the development of this shared infrastructure. On the farm side, we want to build this infrastructure to support, increased market access for these producers across multiple different market channels and support their economic viability and development. And this third point is really, really critical to this project. And I can't emphasize it enough, is that this project is centered on supporting and promoting a more local, just, and sustainable food economy. And the way we're going to do that, and the Project Advisory Committee is doing that, is prioritizing the resources, services, and infrastructure to BIPOC, immigrant, and refugee-led and serving farmers on the one side, and community-based organizations and hunger relief organizations on the other. The end goal is that these organizations will form a governance structure and will operate and lead not only the development, but the operations of this facility in the future. Next slide. Really quick, I got to speed through this. I mentioned a Project Advisory Committee. It's made up of about 20 different community members from various institutions, grassroots hunger relief organizations, farm organizations, some individual growers, and also some representatives from local governments. Next slide. Oh, I should mention that great kind of a highlight was that we recently hired professional staff. So now, instead of just having a voluntary Project Advisory Committee, which we will maintain, we have professional staff helping to move the project forward. From a funding standpoint, the project cost comes in at about $9 million total. King County has contributed $1 million of that toward the pre-construction costs, and the project received $4 million in federal funding last year through Senator Murray's congressionally directed funding support. This summer, we're out doing the community engagement and getting feedback on what the design of the facility and the governance model. In this fall, we'll be releasing an RFP for architectural development and pre-construction services, hoping for construction to commence in spring of 2024 with a 2025 opening. Next slide. I'll hold off here and end. These are just some of the discussion questions and issues and challenges that the project has confronted as it's moved forward. You can review those in your own time, and feel free to reach out to me with any questions that folks have. And I look forward at this next presentation. The next time you hear about this project, it'll be community members coming forth telling you about how the construction is going and how they're gearing up for operations. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Awesome. That was amazing. Thank you, Mike. Okay, we are going to pass things over now to Allie officially to kick off our other policy and program updates.
Great. Thank you, Kelsey. As Kelsey said, my name is Allie Kingfisher. I'm with the Washington State Department of Ecology, and I work in their Organics and Food Center unit. Next slide, please. So just as a very quick refresher, the scope of the organics management law that was passed in 2022, the scope is that it established or amended more than 20 other RCWs. The work was divided into 9 parts, and it impacts government at all levels, businesses, residents, as well as across the diverse organics industry. Next slide, please. And the 9 parts of the law utilizes 5 strategies. We have research, collection and management options, processing, markets, and looking upstream to prevention. Next slide, please. This timeline really focuses on the 3 key parts of the law that impact local government. So the compost procurement ordinances, the business requirements that kick in 2024, and the residential and non-residential collection requirements that will kick in 2027. Next slide, please. One of the overarching challenges of the law has been identifying which jurisdictions need to comply with which components of the law. And so to simplify understanding of who has to comply, Ecology's planners have drafted a spreadsheet that shows who has to comply with which of the organics management law requirements. Now, if you haven't seen this before, we have shared it widely with local government partners. We've also shared it with haulers to vet the data that's reflected in the spreadsheet, but it is a living document and we are continuously updating it as we learn more information. We do have it publicly available in a Box account, and we can share that link in the chat. Next slide, please. So touching briefly on the compost procurement ordinance requirements, or sometimes I might say CPO for short. The CPOs, they are reflect a market strategy. They are designed to close the loop on not just creating more compost, but to increase the market demand for compost in the local area where it's created. It's really based on 3 different tools. Next slide, please. First, jurisdictions that meet specific population or service level requirements must adopt a CPO. To sum up where we are in status of implementation of the 129 jurisdictions that are required to adopt a compost procurement ordinance, as of earlier this month, we've received a total of 53, and 37 of these are from cities and 16 are from counties. We do have an ability, if your jurisdiction has not adopted one yet, we have, they're publicly available again in a Box account, and I'll drop that link as soon as I'm done talking. And so you can go through and see examples of other CPOs that have been adopted, or just if you want to like look and see who has already adopted one. Next slide, please. The second tool within the CPOs is the reporting requirements. And so that's jurisdictions that are required to adopt a compost procurement ordinance. They are also required to report to Ecology. And this includes the total tons of organic material diverted each year, the volume of compost purchased each year, and the source of the compost that is purchased. The next slide, please. All of that information will be reported to Ecology, and Ecology is working to develop an online reporting portal. So we anticipate that won't be live until late of summer 2024 due to staffing resources on our IT side, but that still will give plenty of time to meet the requirement of reporting by the end of 2024. Next slide, please. And the last component, the third leg of the stool of the compost procurement ordinance requirements, is that local jurisdictions who are adopting one must also develop a plan for using that compost and for educating residents about the value of using compost and how the jurisdiction will use compost. And I just want to say in summary, most of the requirements on the compost procurement side really fall to local jurisdictions to implement and to adopt the compost procurement ordinances. And it's also overseen by the Department of Enterprise Services. Ecology's role has been to inform everyone about the requirements and to establish the online reporting portal. Next slide, please. Beginning in January of 24, businesses in certain parts of the state that meet certain requirements must arrange for organic management services. Next slide. For implementation to date, Ecology has had to determine where the boundaries of the business organic management areas, or the BOMA, are. Kelsey already referenced these. And these boundaries are based on 2 criteria. First, if year-round curbside organic collection services that include food is available to businesses. And second, if local compost facilities have the capacity to accept additional materials. Ecology will post an annual determination by July 1st, which will take place for the following year. And so our determination for 2024 is posted on our website. The next slide, please. This is our determination. Kelsey provided the more close-up for King County. This is what it looks like. This is what it currently looks like for the state. I do want to add the caveat that if a local government can provides ecology with written notification and that is verifiable, that one or both of the conditions don't exist in their jurisdiction or in a portion of their jurisdiction, there is the potential for a waiver and to have those areas removed from the BOMA. Next slide, please. Businesses will be phased in over the next 3 years, depending on how much organic and solid waste they generate. In the first year, it starts with 8 cubic yards of organic material, and this will be phased down to include 4 yards of solid waste, so including organics and solid waste material. Next slide, please. Businesses that meet these requirements of the law have a few different options to do it. They do not have to just arrange for curbside collection. If they take other actions such as managing the materials on site, if they self-haul to an organic management facility, or they send their organics to another facility that can use the material for growing food or fiber or prevention in the first place. Next slide, please. So the last section I'm touching on today, in 2027, there are requirements for jurisdictions that have a solid waste management plan to provide organic services to residential and non-residential customers. I just want to throw out the distinction between a non-residential customer and a business is that non-residential customers include multifamily housing. Next slide, please. So again, the cities and counties that meet specific population and organics collection service requirements must provide organic collection services to all of the residents and most non-residential customers at least every other week or at least 26 weeks per year. The threshold for non-residential customers for needing to provide service are more than 0.25 organic cubic yards of organic material per week. I want to say that the letter of the law states that the service needs to be offered, but there's no requirement that customers subscribe to the service, or at least at the state level. Although it is worth mentioning that business customers may need to already comply with the business requirements in the last section that I discussed if they produce more than the 4 cubic yards of solid waste per week. So what does our determination look like, or what do we think it's going to look like? Next slide, please. This is where the 2027 collection requirements apply. So you're looking here at the areas in blue and purple. This is where the requirements apply. In the other areas that are colored, these are the areas that we think may be eligible for waivers. And then everything that's clear is exempt. Next slide, please. Here are some of the resources that you can link to for more information, including our email notification list. And other than that, thank you for your time today. I'll drop those links of resources to our Box account in the Zoom chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Allie, and thanks for everyone. Really rushing through these presentations. I really appreciate it. Thank you for holding your questions. We'll get to those shortly. We have 2 more before that Q&A break, so I would like to welcome Heather.
Great. Hello, everyone. Heather Trim with Zero Waste Washington. I am now starting all of my public talks on the issue of the organics management, or HB 1799, with this slide, the heat dome, which we didn't have this year, but it is, very much, I think, in everyone's memory how hard that was. Next slide. Because this is basically the legislative work that's going on, HB 1799, and then next year's bill that's being planned is about climate change as well as soil health and feeding hungry people. So looking forward to 2024. Next slide. Just for those who are not familiar with us, we are a statewide nonprofit. We work to make trash obsolete, and we primarily work on trying to get laws passed at the city, the county, and the state, a little bit at the federal level. We do research projects, and we do pilot community-based projects. Next slide. And these are our 7 focus areas, which you can read real quick. Okay, next slide. So I want to just say that Rep. Fitzgibbon and then in the House, Senator Doss really led an amazing bill, 1799, that passed in 2022. That was based, the idea of that was sort of a part 1 of a 2 or more part effort. It was to get the ball rolling. It was to make it so that organics management businesses could get bank loans, and that there was a bit of certainty, a little bit of certainty towards the future. But now the goal for 2024, and since Rep. Fitzgibbon has now moved up into management, it's actually going to be Rep. Beth Dolio who's going to lead the bill, and she has agreed to lead the bill, is about you providing even more certainty for the future. Next slide. And what to that end, what is going on right now and these are just some screenshots from the stakeholder meetings that have been going on. So starting in July, we've been having twice a month, very large stakeholder meetings to work on the legislation for 2024. If you are interested in joining these stakeholder meetings, it's open to everyone. You can email me, and I put my email already in the chat, and I can do it again, or Sam, who is managing today's event. She is also helping coordinate and facilitate that stakeholder process. So it's meeting twice a month from July through the beginning of January. Next slide. And that's what I'm mainly focusing on today, are what are the policy items that we are discussing in these meetings. So for example, the next meeting, which is going to be the Wednesday after Labor Day, happy Labor Day, everybody, is going to be on food waste prevention and food rescue. And so here are some of the items that are being discussed. Grants for donation, transportation of donated food, the cold chain infrastructure, and community food hubs and research needs. And it's actually very exciting to have today's forum be so robust. It's really terrific. King County's been putting on these forums, and you can see that King County has done a ton of work moving things forward, and also all the other partners. And of course, the ecology staff has been working really hard and has done really high quality work on implementing 1799, among others. So then also require more data and reporting, address the issue of date labels on food in terms of like best by, sell by, incentivizing backhauling via the Good Samaritan law. That right now, this is a potential idea, removing liability for companies that backhaul food in empty trucks and give them tax incentives, standardizing the operational procedures for donating. For example, standardizing the food collection bins, doing staff training, other procedures at the big brands, for example. And then increasing funding and capacity for local health jurisdictions so that they can do more inspections and technical assistance to the hunger relief organizations and food businesses, schools, and institutions, and then also support consistent application of food safety regulations regarding the donation, basically. That's the wordiest slide. Sorry about that. Next slide. So the model that we are using, but then going beyond, is a bill that was passed in California, 1383, in 2016. Again, based on climate change, so the short-lived pollutants, including methane, and they had a target in that bill. It's been a little bit extended in terms of dates, but if you look in the gray box, to divert organic material from the landfill by 2025 by 75%, all of the landfills, and then also to divert edible food 20% by 2022, and that's all relative to 2015 levels. So our 1799 sets up those goals, but did not go to the next step, which is what California has, which is where we're headed with the next legislation, which is mandating compost in the more dense areas, and also mandating procurement, and then doing some other things like addressing contamination and things like that. California's cutoff for the low density versus high density areas is 7,500. I'd like to point that out so that people are aware that that is the target. Okay, next slide. Okay, so another issue is, and this is the high quality report that's done every 5 years from the Department of Ecology that looks at our material that's going to our landfills and incinerator in Washington. So the organics is the number one thing that we've been focusing on, but organic material that creates methane also includes anything made from plants originally. So for example, paper, construction debris, wood debris, etc. So the thinking is not just about organic material in terms of yard waste and food waste. Next slide. Now, another big issue, these are all the topics that are coming up, by the way, so you can see the headers here, is enforcement, and then facility siting, as was mentioned a little bit by Ali, zoning and permitting, infrastructure, and looking at other technologies, including anaerobic digestion, which is what AD is. And also looking at the issue of the air quality permits. Next slide. So contamination, as you all know, big issue with compost already mentioned today. Need to increase the education and also need we also want to address schools and food waste. So in terms of some of the contamination issues, some of the topics to be discussed are standardizing the messaging and having a more robust statewide campaign and consistency across the state, including, for example, consistent bin colors. Looking at particular pesticides to ban or restrict or phase out, requiring compostable or no produce stickers, and then for schools, requiring 20-minute seated lunch minimum, and then also requiring recess before lunch, where feasible. This is not going to be able to be universal. Next slide. So here are some examples of compostable products. All of these are, strictly speaking, compostable in industrial facilities certified by BPI kind of thing. But the public is very confused, and we have a lot of confusion. A lot of contamination due to this confusion, and also the products don't all break down in all of our facilities. So there is a stakeholder process that was with another bill, 1033, that passed this year in 2013, and will be starting in September. So if anyone's interested in sitting in on those meetings, also email me, or you can also email Ecology to be able, those are going to be Zoom meetings, which will be our online meetings, which will be available for people to participate in. There's a seated committee, but then it'll be open. Next slide. And that plays right into this issue of this bigger topic of how do we improve our organics management in Washington. So here are 4 examples of outreach materials from about a year ago. I carefully deleted any reference to the jurisdictions, but you might recognize your own jurisdiction here. And you can see that each of the jurisdictions accepts very different things. And the messaging is not quite the same, and the imagery is not quite the same. Next slide. I'm almost done. Thanks, Sam. Okay, so another issue is energy generation and credits that people could get in terms of that, as well as carbon sequestration and certification of the organics byproducts. Next slide. Speeding up here a bit. End markets and procurement. So right now, the 1799 is mostly planning for that procurement. In California, in 1383, there is mandated procurement, although we probably in Washington want to do a little bit of a different approach, a little bit of a different formula. Next slide. And then finally, funding. So this is a big topic in the stakeholder meetings. How do we support local governments? How do we support infrastructure development? How do we incentivize things? Next slide. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather. And our last presenter before the Q&A and a break where we just take a breath is Liz from City of Seattle.
Thank you, Kelsey. So, hello everyone. I'm Liz Ficus from Seattle Public Utilities, and I'll share the work we're doing upstream from composting. This is all about preventing waste in the first place and rescuing good, edible food for those in need. Next. So, SBU's 2022 waste characterization studies showed that food is still the #1 material found in both commercial and residential garbage, even though food was banned from Seattle garbage in 2015. This is a problem that needs multiple solutions, It's not one we can compost our way out of it, and prevention in the first place is key. So next. As many of you likely know already, given this audience, EPA has long identified preventing unsold or uneaten food as the top priority, which yields the highest economic, social, and environmental benefits. First, I'll describe how we're helping both consumers and businesses prevent food waste, and then I'll dive into food rescue, which is second on the hierarchy. Next. According to the national nonprofit ReFed, consumers generate approximately 38% of all food waste created. Cheryl Anais, some of you may know her, she's my SBU colleague, runs the program Love Food, Stop Waste. And these pictures are from that. It helps residents avoid waste by taking super practical steps, such as inventorying their fridges before shopping, properly storing food, and making the most of leftovers. And next. We promote these actions through both social and ethnic media, and this past spring, we joined the National Food Waste Prevention Week and encouraged consumers to also buy from businesses who themselves are fighting food waste in their own operations. Seattle, King County, and Washington Department of Ecology, and so many others were among more than 500 partners across the U.S. who participated in this promotion. And next. So now I'll shift to commercial sector food waste prevention. The Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment is a public-private partnership between regional jurisdictions, national nonprofit organizations, and as you can see here, ReFed, World Wildlife Fund, and WRAP from the UK, and then leading food businesses who are the private sector signatories. These businesses have signed a voluntary agreement to reduce food waste, regional food waste, I should say, by 50% by 2030. And to give you some background here, public agencies helped establish this partnership to work across city and state boundaries and to bring the right expertise to the table. We needed expertise from organizations who could be trusted with both private sector data and private sector operational challenges. These are things behind the scenes that we in government can't see. So bringing in ReFed, WWF, and WRAP has helped us succeed in establishing waste baselines, testing and adopting solutions, and sharing progress. And that's the fun. So now we're starting to see the benefits of growing trust and action with these signatories. Next up. Here are just a couple of examples I'll share today. Oh, whoops, sorry. So here are the private sector signatories. These are the food businesses who have signed on to this commitment so far. The grocery retailers, you can see that's the biggest number of logos here, represent more than 50% of all retail sales up and down the West Coast. So this will allow us to scale solutions in meaningful ways. But then as we all saw in COVID, food waste happens across the entire supply chain. So we have intentionally expanded into manufacturing, hospitality, and food service. With each new sector, our resource partners have built customized calculators to gather the data and identify focus areas for our pilots. Okay, and next. So here are just a couple of examples. In the grocery sector, we funded a pilot that used artificial intelligence to more accurately order and track food inventory. The pilot reduced food waste by an average of 14.8% per store, or nearly 27,000 tons of carbon dioxide emission equivalents. That's equal to 1 year of energy use for more than 2,600 homes. As a result of this pilot, one of the participating retailers has started rolling out AI to all of their stores, which means 1,000 locations along the West Coast alone. And next. And then in the manufacturing sector, we worked with Bob's Red Mill by inviting employee ideas to cut food waste. One employee's idea led to a 70% reduction in food waste on just one production line. And next. So now I want to shift to food rescue, and it's really all about collaboration. For anyone who doesn't know, food rescue is the process of collecting edible surplus food from businesses and redistributing it to people who need it most. Typically, it's food banks and meal programs, nonprofits, who carry out these operations, but it involves an entire ecosystem of partnerships across businesses, nonprofits, and public agencies to tackle transportation, logistics, food safety, communication, storage, and redistribution, just to name a few. All right, so one click now, Sam. Thanks. Starting in 2018, SBU convened cross-sector conversations through our Food Rescue Innovation Labs. Our goal was to foster relationships, reveal invisible challenges, and start identifying solutions. We partnered with the UW to research transportation solutions, and we worked with Northwest Food Alliance to assess food rescue operations at PCC community markets and Safeway. And another click, there we go. Next, Northwest Food Alliance helped us to test recommendations through a pilot at 3 Seattle Safeway stores, and we also learned from the 3 food banks who were conducting food rescue at these stores. And then another click. Great. So the 2022 Food Rescue Bin pilot showed that standardization, this might sound familiar from what Heather was saying, is essential across food rescue operations. Just like solid waste, recycling, and compost collection, everyone involved needs to understand which container to put their materials in. They need continuing education, and they need to easily communicate when collection changes suddenly. So if we think about it in terms of food rescue, grocery store employees and the food rescue nonprofits need a consistent, standardized collection bin, the donation bin, same size, color, and labeling. With the exception of Seattle Safeway stores, that doesn't exist right now. And in some PCC stores, I should say, they have a standard bin too. It leads to plenty of unfortunate mistakes when there isn't a standard bin, along with wasted food. Employees need upfront training about how to donate properly, and this training needs continual reinforcement. And then, of course, stores and their food rescue partners need systems to easily and quickly communicate everything from the foods that aren't desired by nonprofits to the unexpected availability of good food at the stores. The Seattle division of Safeway dove in deep after this pilot to understand these findings, and they've worked across all 15 stores in Seattle and now beyond Seattle to use a standardized bin, offer employee training, conduct weekly checks of their operations, and foster meaningful communications to understand their food rescue partner needs. So now SBU has shifted to working with other grocers to see if similar practices could apply in smaller operations. And I just want to put a pin in this. SBU doesn't oversee food rescue operations, right? So instead, we're trying to create the best conditions for successful donation across grocery stores, food banks, and ultimately the people who need this food. And if we succeed, we'll also reduce the amount of food going to garbage and compost. Next, Sam. We're still in the early stages of understanding our role as a public solid waste utility and how we can best partner with other public agencies, businesses, nonprofits, and individuals. So this is an open invitation for all of us to learn together. Here's my contact information along with our food rescue work and the Pacific Coast Food Waste Commitment. And then you can see Cheryl's contact info and the Love Food Stop Waste website. And that's it for me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was muted. I apologize. Thank you, Liz. That was fantastic. We are now going to transition to our Q&A session. We are going to do this up until about 2:25, and then we'll take a nice 10-minute break. So if all the speakers could please turn on your video, and I did see one question in the chat, and I believe this would go to Allie at Ecology. We had a question from Eleni, and it was referencing the spreadsheet in your presentation that featured, I believe, King County, and the question of if Kent is part of that spreadsheet.
I believe so. I don't have it right on top, but we have it's broken out by tab for every county across the state and all the cities of every county. So it should be there.
And that's also on the box
It's in
platform?
it's listed in the box platform.
Awesome.
If you open up the spreadsheet, yeah, it's each county is on the bottom tabs. And so then all the cities and local jurisdictions within that county.
Awesome. I also encourage folks, if you have more questions, to please raise your hand. And then we have, oh, there's a lot of them coming in now. Okay. So question from Stacy, per 1799, who is required to tell specific businesses if and when they meet the threshold for mandatory organics composting? How will this be funded, and are businesses expected to figure this out on their own? Allie, that seems to you.
Yep, I'll jump in on that one. It falls to local jurisdiction, local health departments to enforce the requirements. Ecology is working on, we just had Olivia Caros join our organics and food center team, and she will be working on the development of a toolkit to provide to businesses. And so I know she's already been reaching out to some folks in King County and some cities, and to get a feel for what the scope of what that toolkit might look like. It's still very early days. She's only started in her new position within the last 2 weeks. But if anybody has ideas of what you would like to see in a toolkit that could to provide resources to businesses, please reach out to her. I'll put her contact information in the chat. But Ecology will not be doing the research or the outreach to specific businesses to tell them who to comply. However, on the BOMA map, it is you can interact with it and type in an address, and it'll pop up of whether or not they're in the BOMA or not in the BOMA. So there is that capacity usability within that platform.
And then just to continue that, there was additional questions. If you scroll down, Allie, if you were also looking at the chat, talking about how contamination will be prevented in the organics collected from businesses that are newly mandated to have that compost service, and then who is expected to do the work of outreach, education, technical assistance, and how that be funded.
Outreach and education, I think with so many things such as, recycling, it's the the composting is similar, education and outreach will be coming from Ecology. It'll be coming from the local level. It's a joint effort and a joint lift to address the contamination issue of what is an acceptable material to go into different compost facilities. And as we've already heard some of the speakers discuss, different facilities accept different materials, whether that's compostable serviceware or other materials. And so it does vary from facility to facility, and it's not currently uniform across the state.
And if I can jump in on that. So this issue of contamination is obviously one of our major concerns. Probably everyone on this call who deals with organic compost, et cetera, even anaerobic digestion. And that is why it's a big part of the next legislation. And so Stacy and others, if you are interested in following along on that, do email me or Sam to get on the email list for the stakeholder meetings. The 1033 stakeholder meetings also in terms of the compostable foodware is another major area where we have contamination concerns. So you're right, you're spot on. This is a concern, and that is something that that the 2024 legislation is intended to in part address.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Allie. Moving on to the next question in the chat in order, we have from Moji a question for Mike on the South Seattle Community Food Hub. If a community organization is looking for a commercial kitchen space, how would they sign up to participate in the Food Hub?
Yeah, I'd be happy to connect Moji to the project lead. They're hoping to hear from community partners right now. This is the perfect timing to refine what the facility design is going to look like. So I put my contact information in the chat, Moji. If we can connect, and I can then introduce you to the project lead.
Thanks, Mike. And then an additional question from Moji that soon followed was, I believe this might be to Allie. Are there conversations being had about funding for small community-led composting programs in response to HB 1799?
I think that's actually more for me.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, Allie's like, thank God. This issue about community-based composting and community composting, et cetera, is definitely also part of the conversation moving forward. In California, what they've done is they've had very large grants that have come from the state to the cities, and some of the cities have then in turn been able to do grant programs within their own community, or counties have been able to do that as well. So we are looking at this point, there is this high-level discussion, I would say high level is in not a lot of detail yet, on using some of the CCA money, the Climate Commitment Act money, because this is about climate reduction, and what kind of funding could be used to come to local governments to help support both the outreach and education piece, but also potentially pass through to help with the food rescue, the community-based efforts, et cetera.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. I'm going to go to Tom next here in the chat, and then Rebecca, I'll go to you because I see that you have your hand raised. Tom asks, is there any study of King County loop product compared to compost as a soil amendment for larger sites? I wonder if the hauling and spreading efforts of compost could be outweighed by the use of spraying the loop instead. I could briefly answer that. I will admit I am newer to the county, and I can work with the loop program manager, Dave Keeney, to get some more information on that, and we will get back to you. I see Kat's unmuting herself. Kat might be able to add to this, one of the loop program managers.
Yeah, Dave and I are both on this call, so we could probably take that. The loop program has done some research into food and yard waste compost versus compost made with loop, but the main issue with loop right now is that it is what's known as a Class B product. So it is treated, but there are a small number of remaining pathogens in it, so it can't be used the same way that a food and yard waste compost can be used. Dave is in charge of developing a pilot program where we will be creating a compost, and then biosolids or loop-based compost can be used in similar ways. There are, you want to have the right product for the right purpose, but it's a complementary product, not a replacement product, I would say.
Thank you, Kat. That was huge. Rebecca, you've had your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I popped this in the chat, but what are the actual means for enforcement of 1799? Who's going to be doing it? How is it going to be determined, etc.? Those are things that I don't see laid out, and people ask us.
Sure, I'll jump in on this one, Kelsey. The different, I mean, as I said, 1799, it's sweeping, and it updated or amended or established more than 20 other laws. And so it depends on the specific section of the law of where enforcement authority falls. And so, for example, in the chat, you specifically mentioned business requirements, and the law specifies that falls to jurisdictional health departments for enforcement. But different sections of the law have different, the enforcement authority falls to different folks, and in some cases it's not specified who is responsible or has the authority to enforce.
That is kind of confusing for jurisdictions, as everybody's like, get on board, and then we say, okay, we're on board, who do we go to? And the answer is, we don't know.
If you have, I mean, it's clear for the business requirements that it's the local jurisdictional health departments. But if there's other specific parts of the law, reach out to me, and we can comb through the law together, and I can let you know who has the enforcement authority of those other sections.
Thank you, Allie. Thank you, Rebecca. We probably have room for one or two more questions before a well-deserved break. So we have a question here from Robbie asking, will there be required testing for persistent herbicide pesticide contamination in compost?
Well, I can start at least on that. So right now there is required testing on compost. I don't believe it includes many, if any, pesticides at the moment, but this is part of the discussion moving forward. And in Oregon, they have already essentially banned one chemical. And so this is a tough issue, and there may need to be a bit of an evolving discussion about it as it moves forward in terms of this. But we do have hay pesticides that are used in that stunted tomatoes, and that was actually discovered here in Washington State.
I hope that answered your question, Robbie. Thank you, Heather. If there is more to that, please add it to the chat and we will get to it in the aftermath. Okay, going down to, let's see, from Jenna at Kirkland. Is there concern about hauler capacity to service organics at the large increase of commercial customers and the carts needed, staffing trucks, etc.? Who feels okay to take that one?
I totally can take that one. So you may know one of the slides that I had on mine did include funding for infrastructure. So potentially grants and incentives for that. But this also is a large business opportunity for the waste industry. And we are already seeing an expansion or buyouts and that kind of thing. Quite a few happened last year in 2022, and I think one in 2023. So this is going to be a opportunity for more material to come to the composters, or anaerobic digestion, or other things like chomp. And you see some other people who are here on the Zoom. There are a lot of new evolving technologies that are coming in. So this is, we believe, a way for them to expand their businesses, and thus they would be getting bank loans and amortizing, et cetera. But again, we are looking to potentially do some look at the idea of doing grant funding for infrastructure as well as local governments.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather. And with that, it is 2:25 and we want to give everyone a well-deserved break for 10 minutes. And we will reconvene at 2:35. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, everyone should start beginning to come back. I hope it was a restful break. Can I get confirmation, Safira, that you're back as well? Because you're our first presenter next.
Yep, I'm here, ready to go.
Awesome. All right, well, let's kick off part 2 of our agenda. This section will be coming from various organizations and businesses conducting work in our communities in King County. So I'm going to pass it over to Safira to start us off.
Awesome. Just wanted to make sure, since I am joining on the phone, are the slides up at the moment?
They are.
Okay, great. Awesome. I'll start now. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Safira. I'm WSOT's Neighborly Needs Coordinator. Thank you for joining us this far, and thank you to the organizers for having us. Today, I'll be presenting to you about WSOT's waste prevention program called the Neighborly Needs Project in partnership with the Circular Economy Grant. Next slide, please. And so here's a quick rundown of what we're going over today. I'll introduce you to WSOT and the Neighborly Needs Project, list our project activities, describe how we've used the Circular Economy Grant to expand, and how we plan to sustainably expand over the next few years. Moving on to the next slide. So before I explain what WSOT is as an organization, I want to explain what WSOT means. WSOT is an Arabic word meaning middle way or balance and just, and that's how we intend our community to be. So in 2012, WSOT was started by my colleagues to create space for the American Muslim experience. We invite those who are curious with Islam as well as those practicing the faith. As a nonprofit, we've found the community partnerships and innovative ways to strengthen our impact. In the photo shown here, you'll see a group of our most recent cooking class held by WSOT. And in the next slide, I'll be showing you a video made by one of WSOT's lecturers that introduces you to our Neighborly Needs program. And then if we could go on to our next slide and then start that video, please.
Each morning, we prostrate upon the earth to remind ourselves we come from the earth and are sustained by it. WSOT supports local farmers for whom the tilling of the soil is not about maximizing profit, but cultivating the earth's abundance. Through experiential education and community engagement, we emphasize the importance of caring for the earth and caring for each other. So as not to waste this abundance, we bring the surplus produce of our farmers to local caterers who turn this produce into nourishing meals for our community. We bring these meals to shelters, soup kitchens, community centers, and beyond. For as the Prophet Muhammad said, no true believer in God goes to bed full while his neighbor goes hungry. We support farmers by bringing their surplus produce to local caterers, which supports them in continuing to sustain and nourish our community. We are WSOT.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then moving on to the next slide, where I'll start talking more about the Neighborly Needs Project in depth. So the Neighborly Needs Project started in 2019 in response to the food insecurity we saw in our Muslim communities, which also coincided with a lot of the different BIPOC and immigrant communities across South Seattle and South King County. The Neighborly Needs Project at its core provides warm and nutritious meals to those in need, but we take a further step towards waste prevention. We source our ingredients from surplus stock from either farms, grocery stores, and other food rescue organizations. We sponsor community chefs and serve meals at community sites to get the best outreach. In addition to meals, we provide information on how one can reduce their food waste individually or where they can find sites or organizations helping with food justice. And then on to the next slide, please. So we've broken down the Neighborly Needs Project task into 3 parts. The first task being here is sourcing ingredients. We source free ingredients and food items from food rescue organizations that have surplus produce, meaning more than what they can donate. To highlight a few, we've worked with Fair Start in Seattle, Emergency Feeding Program in Renton, African Community Housing Development in SeaTac, and the Delridge Farmers Market near White Center. And so with the help of these organizations, WSOT has rescued over 3,000 pounds of produce and food items as of July 2023. And in order to transport all of this produce, WSOT has purchased a refrigerated van that can hold a larger capacity of produce and protect it during transport. If we could move on to the next slide. And so the second project task is to prepare and serve meals. The Neighborly Needs Project started by catering from local chefs, but we found that we could actually reduce overall program costs and better incorporated our donated produce by bringing caterers in-house to a commissary kitchen space. We further reduce costs through the help of trained volunteers that assist our caterers. Once these meals are made, we bring our meals to spaces with high community contact, such as libraries, clinics, mosques, events, and more. Here you see photos of us preparing meals at the commissary kitchen site at the Rainier Beach Urban Wetland and Farm, and another photo of us serving meals at the South Park Library. Next slide, please. Our third project task is to further educate communities on food waste prevention and food justice. We direct communities to free and low-cost meal programs and produce boxes and more. We've tracked over 1,500 in-person engagement, along with over 16,000 accounts engaged on social media and online. Another innovative thing we've done is we've also started cooking classes taught by our community chefs to create culturally relevant meals using commonly donated produce. And next slide, please. So here's our results and impact. We serve over 2,000 meals per month. We rescue 800 pounds of produce and food items per month, and we engage 4,000 people online and in person per month. Next slide. And so here are some of the ways that the Circular Economy Grant has transformed our Neighborly Needs project. We're able to source items that are not regularly found in donations, such as halal meat or food packaging. We're able to have a steady and commercial grade kitchen to cook these meals out of. And to pull it all together, we've been able to hire staff needed for the community partnership, administration, and the food education of this project. Thank you. And for the next slide, we'll be going over our WSOT goals internally and externally over the next 2 years. To add to the program sustainability, we're interested in changing our current pay model from per meal to hourly as we do more meals out of the commercial kitchen. Eventually, WSOT would like to gain our own community space that includes a commercial kitchen where we have a larger service hour that we can provide out of. And we'd also like to expand our role of our volunteer coordinator to rely on the generous assistance of our community. And then to the next and final slide. Externally, we have a couple of ideas to ensure the sustainability of Neighborly Needs. We're interested in seeking funding from organizations that are far below market rate, such as $5 per meal. That's something that is still, we're still looking into as of right now. Another thing we'd like to do is to partner with more farms and food rescue organizations, and also provide food scraps to local farms or programs interested in composting. And that concludes our presentation on Neighborly Needs. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions or are interested to learn more, feel free to reach out to me or my colleague, Sam Chesnow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Safira. We are going to move on to next to Bobby, who's going to be presenting on CHOP. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kelsey. You can go ahead and skip to the next slide, Sam. All right, so today I'm presenting on behalf of CHOMP. CHOMP is a company that builds and installs small to mid-scale anaerobic digesters that are primarily designed for processing food waste. And if you're not familiar with anaerobic digestion, basically it means to break down without oxygen. So we take food waste, we put it into a sealed container that's devoid of oxygen, and naturally this produces methane, which is sort of a bad word in this group, I know that, but this comes from a renewable source and it's used to offset natural gas methane. So it can actually be a very valuable resource. And so we then take that methane and upgrade it to pipeline grade natural gas. And this can be used to create heat, hot water, electricity, and even vehicle fuel. And another output that comes from this anaerobic digestion process is biofertilizer, which is a microbe-rich nutrient solution that is great for farms, gardens, and landscapes. Next slide, please. So the location of focus for this grant was our Vashon Bioenergy Farm, which is an anaerobic digester that is adjacent to the Island Springs Tofu Factory, which is right outside my window right now. And we take the tofu waste from the factory, which is known as okara, and we process it through our digester to create all of those great things that I mentioned in the previous slide. And Sam, if you would be so kind to click the picture that has a video link. There we go. Perfect.
Hi, I'm Tim Tiscornia, CEO of CHOMP. I'm here with Jan Allen, the founder of CHOMP, and we're at Vashon Island, a suburb of Seattle. Now, this unit takes the waste from a tofu factory. We create renewable natural gas and a bunch of organic biofertilizer. What is biofertilizer?
Well, so this is certified for organic food production. These tabletop farming systems, this is soil, but we put our fertilizer in that soil, and we're giving it live beneficial microbes, all the basic nutrients, carbon, and water, all four of those things. And our nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, it's all really rich because we use, in many of our cases, we use the full spectrum of food.
And so not only when you apply our biofertilizer onto your land are you getting a fertilizer for the crops that come out, but you're really investing in your soil to make your soil healthy.
This is classic regenerative farming. No-till, in this case, it's a tabletop system with 6 crops a year, but it's regenerative because we're building the soil. We're not depleting the soil.
Now, we've been doing growth tests with our biofertilizer for the last couple of years. And typically, what is that percentage improvement do we see in the yield?
So we have partnered with organic farms on this island, and they had their own favorite fertilizer regimen that they used. We asked them to try ours next to theirs, and we got at least 30% better yield. And in some cases, like with grasses and green produce, it could be 100% better.
So Jan, we were talking about the digestate in the growth trials. We have over 30 farms here on Vashon Island that are using our biofertilizer to grow their crops. But it just wouldn't make sense if we loaded it up in a diesel truck or a gas truck. Here we have our truck that is tofu powered. We take our RNG and we go ahead and put it into these tanks here.
This is what we run on every day, is the gas from our food waste.
We get nice range, we get plenty of power, it runs, you would never even know the difference.
Right, the conversion is something we did and it's easy to do.
We go ahead and we take the waste from the tofu factory, we turn it into RNG, we go ahead and grow beautiful organic crops, and then we take the output, the biofertilizer, and we deliver it to the farms around the neighboring area so that they too can grow beautiful organic crops to feed our community.
Great, thanks, Sam. So exciting stuff, right? Sorry, I should have given a volume heads up before that started. I didn't realize it was going to be that loud. All right, next slide, please. So for this grant, we wanted to really focus on the biofertilizer aspect of our business model because we haven't had a whole lot of challenges selling the digesters themselves, but we have had a handful of customers come back to us that are a bit overwhelmed with the amount of biofertilizer that the digesters produce. And understandably so, because biofertilizer is different than most fertilizers in the sense that it's liquid and it's not super highly concentrated in nutrients compared to what you would expect a organic fertilizer to have. So that being said, it's really great stuff and we've seen amazing results, but we needed to kind of crack this code of how to really streamline the use of biofertilizer. So we decided to create an infrastructure plan to streamline use, collect carbon and soil biological data to better understand what's going on in the soil after applying the biofertilizer. We wanted to distribute 100,000 gallons within this year, and as well as collect waste diversion and greenhouse gas data. Next slide, please. So I'm not sure why I'm a ghost in this picture, but the first thing that we did for this grant was consulted with experts within CHOMP and then outside of CHOMP, being myself. And this was to basically create a data management plan, a marketing plan, an infrastructure enhancement plan, and a farmer education and outreach plan. Next slide, please. And then after this, we built relationships in the community. We realized that we would have to make relationships with a lot of farmers in King County in order to disperse 100,000 gallons of this liquid. So we decided to start from a higher level, which is the associations that many of these farmers are associated with. So one of the main ones being Vashon Island Growers Association, as well as Highline College, Living Well Kent, and some others. And so these were really instrumental connections to gaining the trust and quickly educating farmers on the benefits of biofertilizer so that we could make those connections and deliveries a lot faster. Next slide, please. Then we purchased some infrastructure and some new equipment. Thanks, Sam. So here on the left, top left of the screen, we have the tofu powered truck that we purchased with these funds. We also have an array of containers for storing the biofertilizer at each of the farms. And then in the top right corner, we have an example of an injector, which turned out to be the most hands-off, most efficient, most streamlined way to spread this biofertilizer, which was to basically inject it directly into farmers' irrigation systems. Next slide, please. And then we realized that we were distributing a lot of biofertilizer, which was great, but then we needed to enhance the digester itself so that it produced even more biofertilizer to meet demand. So we installed this pretty high-grade auger to automate the process of moving the okara tofu waste into the digester at a much faster pace and in a way that it could be done 24 hours a day if we choose to do so. Next slide, please. And then we collected some preliminary data. This is soil data of the carbon and biology of the soils of 30 different farmers in King County. And this is just preliminary data. We're going to go back in October and get the sort of after of the before and after testing to compare results. And so that will be released at a later time. Next slide, please. And then we made a whole lot of biofertilizer deliveries. In fact, I made 3 this morning, right before this call. So some of these deliveries are small to home gardens that, you know, are maybe 275 gallons per month. And then some of these other places, like the picture on the left is Pacific Crest Farm on Vashon Island, that takes about 1,000 gallons a week. And then the picture on the right with Paco is Horseneck Farm in King County in Auburn, and they take about 1,000 gallons per week as well. Next slide, please. And here are the key metrics sort of to date. This is actually from September to June, but in that time frame, we have diverted 32.6 tons of tofu waste from the Vashon transfer station. We have reduced and avoided 4.37 tons of CO2 equivalent from entering the atmosphere. And we have delivered about 53,000 gallons of biofertilizer to be returned to the soil in King County. And in the next 4 months, we expect to double all of these numbers when we reach our 100,000 gallons delivered goal. Next slide, please. Thank you so much, everyone. If you would like to connect with myself or with Chomp, please reach out to the email on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. This was fantastic. And moving right along, I'm going to pass it over to Jessica and Christina to talk about Food Cycler.
So hi, everyone. My name is Christina Zardo. I'm the Director of Municipal Solutions at Food Cycle Science.
And I'm Jessica Taylor. I'm the Municipal Program Manager and take care of implementing our programs at Food Cycle Science.
Next slide. So Food Cycle Science is a Canadian company. Our mission is to change the way the world thinks about food waste by offering simple solutions that change our behaviors. Our range of innovative on-site technology cater to various uses from industrial to commercial and residential. Our countertop food cycler is our flagship technology available to consumers through Vitamix. We also extend our solutions to classrooms and municipalities, enabling waste reduction, landfill diversion, and carbon footprint reduction. Next slide. So we collaborate with local governments to empower their communities to eliminate waste through the use of food cyclers in residential homes. We've had a lot of success with these community-based partnerships in Canada, where our solutions are in place in over 100 municipalities. Last year, we were fortunate to receive funding from the RE+ Circular Economy Grant, which facilitated the launch of our program in King County, marking it as the very first US community to pilot this decentralized model of managing food waste. Next slide. Now, we all know that food waste is a pressing global issue. It contributes to the effects of climate change. It costs a lot of money. It contributes to food insecurity, and it's generally yucky. We also know that it's a solvable issue. for which there are existing solutions like curbside collection and backyard composting. And make no mistake, individuals want to play their part. So by making composting and its alternatives more available and more accessible to more people, we can increase engagement and impact. Next slide. Our technology really focuses on making food waste easy to deal with and right in the home. It starts with putting your food waste into a bucket, placing the bucket into the machine, and pressing start. Next slide. We can process most household food waste, including meat, fish, dairy, most bones and pits, coffee grinds and filters, eggshells, fruit and veggie scraps, etc. Next slide. The process takes between 4 and 8 hours or overnight. It uses a combination of heat, air, and agitation to reduce your food waste by about 90% and transform it into just a handful of dry, inert, and nutrient-rich soil amendment. So this byproduct can be used in gardening, in home composting, or integrated beneficially into existing composting infrastructure. Next slide. So the food cycler is a net negative carbon solution. What this means is that just like installing solar panels or planting trees, when you're using the food cycler to avoid sending food waste to landfill, you're avoiding more greenhouse gases than you are creating in the process. Next. And each food cycler avoids 393 kilograms of CO2e per year, which is equivalent to the absorption benefits of 16 trees per year. Next slide, and I'll pass it over to Jeff.
Thank you. So thanks to the RePlus Circular Economy Grant, we have been able to launch a successful and comprehensive food cycler program across King County. Through the program, over 400 King County residents have purchased a food cycler at a more affordable and accessible rate, and this number continues to grow every week. Beyond this, we have partnered with the YWCA Family Village in Issaquah to provide 100 households living on low incomes a free food cycler for their homes. And we're also partnering with schools to provide free food cyclers for classrooms, along with an education package that will help teachers incorporate the food cycler into their curriculum. Next slide, please. Across the county, we are also engaging with the community in several ways and have some exciting events coming up in the next 2 months, including free in-person and virtual workshops related to soil health. And our team will be in attendance at Issaquah's Welcome Week to feature the program and the food cycler. Next slide, please. So I would like to quickly give you a sneak peek of the results from the ongoing pilot program. Residents that purchased a food cycler through the program had a device delivered right to their home and answered an online survey after using it for 12 weeks. The early results of this survey show that 98% of pilot participants will continue using their food cycler after the pilot period. And this is a level of participation that far exceeds any other organic waste management solution out there today and speaks to the willingness of residents to adopt this program. We also see that the average household is processing about 11.5 pounds of food waste per week in their food cycler. And this is the equivalent to 600 pounds of food waste per household per year. Next slide. When we asked residents if increased awareness of food waste motivated them to waste less food, 82% said yes, it did. When people are managing their food waste at home, it is a more intimate process and they become more aware of how much food they're wasting in the first place. We always say that the most effective waste diversion strategy is not to generate any in the first place. So the awareness that comes with this program is very important. Residents become better shoppers and more efficient with cooking and eating their food. We're also seeing that 83% of residents said that the food cycler complements or enhances their current curbside service, showing that it can be integrated with current systems that are already in place. Next slide. In the survey, we also asked residents for feedback on the program as a whole, and we have seen several positive threads throughout. One resident said it made a huge difference in their waste production. Others called for the program to be made available to more low-income households and have it be part of state funding for the environment. We received many responses thanking King County for being proactive with a program like this. And we also heard from several residents that experience issues with wildlife like bears, and sometimes because of their proximity to a state park, and that the food cycler has helped them remove attractants from their waste and compost bin. Next slide. So before we wrap up, I would like to invite you all to get involved in our program. Registration is now open for our workshops and webinars. If you have a school in mind that might like to have a food cycler, we do still have some to donate. You can also request a customized life cycle analysis to assess the positive impact food cyclers could make in your community. And of course, you are welcome to purchase a subsidized food cycler for your own household. We are always looking for new opportunities to collaborate and increase the impact of our programs. So whether you're here on behalf of a municipality, local business, organization, or hauler, and you're looking for innovative ways to prepare for HB 1799, we would love to hear from you. Next slide. So on behalf of Food Cycle Science, Christine and I would like to thank you for your time and encourage you to reach out if you have any questions or would like to follow up on anything we mentioned here today. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Christina. Okay, we are gonna move right on to Joy with Elk Run Farm.
Thank you. This is Joy with Elk Run. As was just said, I'm the community outreach coordinator. We are a farm in Maple Valley, and we are dedicated solely to growing food for food banks. Next slide, please. We're a program under the South King County Food Coalition. The coalition was started in the 1980s, and our farm took off in about 2015. Next slide, please. A little bit about the coalition. The coalition is made up of 13 different food banks in South King County, including Auburn, the Covington Storehouse, Des Moines Area Food Bank, Enumclaw, Highline, Kent, Maple Valley, the Multi-Service Center in Federal Way, the Renton Food Bank via the Salvation Army, Plateau Outreach Ministries, also in Enumclaw, White Center, and the Vashon Murray Community Food Bank as well. Next slide. This is just a map of where the South King County Food Coalition's service area reaches. So our food bank farm serves this footprint here in South King County, just under Seattle, all the way out to our county edge. Okay, next slide. This is just a quick snapshot of some of the highlights of our best year so far, which was in 2020. So we are striving to achieve that same level that we had, about 10,000 pounds of produce, fruit and vegetables grown annually. Typically, we have 300 to 400 individual volunteers on an annual basis with about 2,000 volunteer hours. In 2020, we had about 45 different vegetables. We're probably expanding that, probably growing between 50 to 55 at this point, and hoping to maximize the dollar output of that to about $40,000. Next slide, please. So we're a volunteer-powered farm built by the community here around us in Maple Valley and the surrounding area. We currently have 3 employees on our farm. The farm has fluctuated between 2 and 3 employees since its inception. We have a few interns during our summer internship program, and then we also have support from AmeriCorps Vistas that have been sprinkled in throughout our inception in 2015. But we are able to survive based on all of our volunteers that come in, those 300 to 400 volunteers that come and support us. We have, during the summer, 3 dedicated volunteering days during the week. And then during the school year, we're lucky enough to be right across from the Tahoma High School, and the Tahoma Plant Sciences students come to work the farm once a week, including growing food for our food banks. Education is another pillar that Elk Run Farm holds very high. Next slide, please. So we grow, this is just a snapshot of some of the things that we grow. As most of you know, food insecurity touches many American communities, but it also affects a large population of refugee and immigrant communities that rely on our food bank system in King County. So a lot of these immigrants and refugees include a lot of Eastern European communities, lots of Ukrainian and Russian, Turkish, Afghani, Pakistani, Central North American, Mexico, East and Southeast Asia. So because of that, we really try to focus what we're growing at the farm to be culturally relevant to what is traditional in a lot of these dietary practices. We do some experimental production of different types of vegetables. This year, we've been focusing on bitter melon and also doing choysum and gailon and some types of Asian vegetables that sometimes are harder to locate. We've also found through talking to a lot of our food bank clients when we do free farm stands that herbs are an extremely important culturally relevant food that we continue to try and grow more of. Next slide, please. So a little history about Elk Run. Next slide. We started out as a golf course. This is what our farm looked like in the fall of 2014 before we broke ground. Next slide. And this is what it looked like a few weeks ago. As you can see, we have some electrical lines that go over our farm, which prevent it from being used for residential building. So the land was acquired by the city of Maple Valley, and we leased that land from Maple Valley Parks for a minimal amount. And then we in turn grow food on this 4.5 acres. Let's see. Next slide, please. Here's an aerial view of our farm. We are a no-till farm, so our beds are permanent. We have 8 sections with 15 beds per section. Beds are 40 feet long, 30 inches wide with 18-inch pathways. So because we're no-till and those beds are permanent, we work hard to maintain the soil health and the aerification in that and try to prevent compaction. So we have permanent walking ways as well. The beds are called 4 feet on the center, since they're 30 inches plus 18 inches for a total of 48 inches wide. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we were transforming that soil from the very sandy and non-nutritive soil that was a golf course into what we now have at Elk Run. So initially there was some tilling and plowing to try and get rid of a lot of the rocks and a lot of the debris that was in that golf course area. Next slide. I thought it would be interesting for you to see some of our soil health statistics from when we first did soil testing in 2015 to now what it was during our last soil test in 2020. We're due to do another one, so it'll be really interesting to see what those numbers look like in comparison. But you can see that our pH went from 5 up to about 6.2, but what's really compelling is that organic matter from 1.9% up to 3.6%. And overall, you can see that the mineral compositions have increased quite a bit, anywhere from about 150 to 200% across the board. Next slide, please. So how did we transform that soil? Well, a lot of it comes down to composting. On the left, you can see how we started doing composting in just piles that we had. But this last year, we had an Eagle Scout come in and he built us a 3-bin composting system. So that was what we are using currently. Next slide, please. Here are some pictures that our Eagle Scout took as he was putting together that he poured the concrete and everything. You can see that we have a little temperature gauge there. Our composting process, actually, if you could go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. For our composting process, we are composting any kind of nitrogen-rich green plant material waste. that we have at the farm, which we have a large amount of, except for things like tansy, Scotch broom, thistle, and anything that might have any kind of fungal infection like blight. We obviously keep the water or keep the compost moist. And most of our compost right now is aerobic instead of anaerobic, but we are now starting to do some testing with some anaerobic processes as well. We ideally like to get the compost up to about 140 degrees Fahrenheit for a few days, but overall keep it for or have it remain at around 100 to 120 degrees after that. Process takes a few months. We sift it with a homemade trommel that we have. Everything, well, most things at the farm are homemade. So on the left, you'll see a picture of that homemade trommel that we use. We go through and sift it, and then we just transport it. And those are some volunteers last fall that were helping to replenish some of our beds that we were planting again for the fall. And next slide. So I kept it short. I know we're running a little bit behind, but there's many things I did not touch on, such as our food forests that we have at the farm. We also have some native pollinator strips that we're working on, and also doing future expansion. If you're interested in learning more, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and that is my contact information. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. That was fantastic. And we're just going to move on to Roma Jean with Feed 7 Generations. Thank you so much, Roma Jean, for being here.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate and honor your time. I am having connectivity issues, so I'm going to keep my video off. I hope that you can hear me. I just want to thank everybody. Today has been really nourishing and fulfilling. I feel very value aligned. I'm hearing a lot of the language that we really use and support in our projects. I'm really looking forward to further connecting with people in this room. Good afternoon. My name is Roma Jean Thomas. I'm a Muckleshoot tribal member. I am also the executive director of Feed 7 Generations. We are a female-led Indigenous nonprofit in the food sovereignty sector. You can find us at feed7generations.org. Next slide, please. Feed focuses on revitalizing the health and wellness of tribal communities by amplifying the voice of Native people, reconnecting to ancestral community health practices, and elevating land management strategies. We really listen to our community and try for our projects to be community-led, really finding sustainability in multi-generation work. Next slide, please. Currently, we're doing some exciting projects. We're really lucky to be, like I said, I'm a Muckleshoot tribal member, and my particular Duwamish ancestry comes from where the UW campus is now. So our ancestral villages are from there. So we see ourselves as stewards to this place. We really engage as King County citizens, as Muckleshoot's a little bit south currently where we're located. But we have some great projects that align with some funding right out of King County. We have a great initiative, Rethink Your Drink. You can find how to connect with us, how to connect with some of this curriculum on our website. But it's really beverage interventions, rethinking health strategies. In October, we're lucky enough to have our second annual Food Sovereignty Symposium. You can also find that on our website. If you know any Indigenous producers or educators or allies that you think would benefit from the content at our symposium, please send them to our website. We have a beautiful Native Plants and Foods curriculum portal. You can find a lot of curriculum material, really that store outside your door, that outside education material. If you know educators, especially place-based ones that work with BIPOC communities, it is a great portal to find curriculum that supports the environments that we live in right here in Washington. And we are currently working on a Native Grown and Gathered digital resource guide. This will be native food to native people, uplifting food producers, farms, agricultural products out of Indian country. We're again lucky to have the support of funds, Environmental Justice Fund, Food Equity Fund, among others. And that will be launched at our Native Grown and Gathered Symposium in October, but you'll be able to find all the information on our website. Next slide, please. Again, the Native Plants and Foods Curriculum Portal, it's been created in partnership with many tribal partners, Muckleshoot, Swinomish, Grub Wild Foods and Medicines Program, Feed 7 Generations, our nonprofit, Urban Indian Health Institute and Oregon State University. It's in collaboration with Native elders and Native educators. It's a space where curriculum exists and from a cultural competent lens. There is a video and a quiz to help to make sure that educators are engaging with the curriculum materials and our environment mindfully. Again, there's the information for the Native Plants and Foods Curriculum Portal. Again, it can be found on our website, but it is free curriculum materials, place-based environmental outdoor education, thinking about the social emotional needs of our classrooms. Again, K through 12 as well as higher education. So just a great resource and free, and the National Science Foundation really supported us in the funds for that. Next slide, please. Here is the information about our second annual Food Sovereignty Symposium. Year 1 was virtual. Year 2, we are going to be in person. Our theme is Native Grown and Gathered. Last year, the theme was keeping culture and agriculture. We're still obviously really grounded and rooted in agricultural production and agricultural work in Indian country, uplifting our food system and partnering with all these awesome organic projects that we're hearing about, composting, recycling, all of these different initiatives. We're very interested. And we hope that this will be a space for like-minded individuals to come together. So again, free symposium. Please send the information out. You can find it on the website. Next slide, please. And because we're closing the day, I would be remiss if I didn't just share, because I realized in the agenda, I would be the last. And I always just she started with a beautiful grounding activity. And I like to exit systems similar to the way that I came in. And so I just wanted to share a product of a project we collaborated on some years back, but it's traditional food principles. Food is the center of culture. Traditional foods are whole foods. We eat with the seasons. We eat a variety of foods. We eat local foods. Wild and organic are better for health. Honor the food web. Cook and eat with good intention. Promote generosity and cultivate food sovereignty. I just wanted to end with those words because all of you really spoke to all of those things. And these are at the center of our food system and our land stewardship. So thank you so much for the time. And I look forward to connecting with all of you in the future.
Thank you so much, Roma Jean. And that was a great way to kind of tie up today's event. That was really powerful. Given that we have about 11 minutes left of today's meeting, we're going to shorten our Q&A quite a bit. I apologize. We do have some closing remarks we need to get through. If we can stop sharing the screen and speakers turn on your camera. I think one of the first questions, thank you for speakers who've been answering questions already ongoing in the chat, but a question to food cycle science. There's a question of how does the CO2 metric look when that output is composted?
That's a great question. So there would be no change to the CO2e offsets if it's composted, as long as you're composting properly. So many people don't know that if you don't turn it often enough, it can create methane. So you want to make sure you're doing composting properly as well.
Awesome. And then more questions for FCS is what percentage of participants responded to the survey on the food cycler? Seems likely that people who bother responding are more likely to be using the food cycler, et cetera.
Great question. Thank you for that. Because it is a rolling program and there is a 3-month delay. So when I said
we have over 400 out there right now, and you would have seen 192 survey responses. There were, I would say, just over 200, somewhere between 200 and 250 people who were eligible to respond to the survey when I prepared this data. So as it is a rolling program, we will continue to assess the survey response. But I will say that in our municipal programs that we have been running for a couple of years now, we usually see 75 to 85, sometimes up to 90% response rate in our surveys. So we do, try as hard as we can to get as many responses as possible, but understand that there may be some biases there. But we will certainly keep that in mind when we report the final data for the grant.
Great, thank you. There were more FCS questions, but I'm gonna try to get some of our other speakers' questions answered as well. There was a question to Joy about using any commercially produced compost on the farm.
As far as I know, within the last year or two that I've been there, we have not been using any commercial compost, just compost that's been created at our farm. We have received manure deliveries in the past that have been used in that compost. We get wood chip deliveries as well. But as far as receiving commercial compost, I'm unaware of that.
Awesome, thank you. And then I see some of the questions from FCS are being answered in the chat. Did we get to the one about adding microorganisms to the machine to turn food scraps? Jessica, Christina?
No, I don't think we got to that one, but I can respond quickly. So no, microorganisms do not need to be added in the food cycler. So the device will grind and dehydrate your food waste, and it makes it into a dry soil amendment that has all the nutrients from your food, but it's not a finished compost. So when the soil amendment gets integrated back into soil and exposed to air or water, microbial reactivation will take place and finish that composting process, even without additives or any consumables. So we're continuously investing in the science behind this, and we provide education materials to ensure that it is being used in the most beneficial way, and people understand that it isn't a finished compost when it comes out of the food cycler.
Great, thank you. I am going through the chat. If I missed your question, please raise your hand. If not, I don't think I'm missing any others. If we did not, oh, Heather, yes, please go ahead.
Well, I have a question for Bobby. On your liquid fertilizer liquid, you said it has low nutrients. Can you tell us, so in terms of the farmers, if they were like percentage related to regular compost, what's like what percentage nutrients is it? Like a half, a third?
Yeah, so from my understanding, traditional compost has a rating that's typically in the range of like NPK wise, like 0.5, 1.5, 0.5. Our biofertilizer is about 0.10, 0.10, 0.10. So like 1/10 of a percent of each NPK. But it's interesting because it's rich in microorganisms. And for whatever reason, it's showing fantastic results. We're hearing claims from our farmers that they've never seen their crops this big. And what we're learning is that there's actually a lot to learn about microorganisms' roles in growing plants. And so we think that has something to do with it. So I don't know. Yeah, there's still a lot to be discovered.
Awesome, thank you, Bobby. Sam, if you could please share the screen for the final slides, we'll move into the closing and wrap up. All right, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you again for joining us here at King County Solid Waste and King County. We've had wonderful speakers here today, and we thank you for giving your time to present, and for those who attended to hear all the wonderful projects and work that is being done around the King County community. When exiting the meeting, you will be presented with a survey. If you cannot fill out at this time, you're having some tech issues and it doesn't show up, We will be sending an event follow-up email that will include the survey. It will include the meeting recording, a copy of the presenter slides, and then if any other questions that we did not get to in the chat, we will try to address common themed questions there. If you have additional questions, please reach out to compost@kingcounty.gov. Again, we thank you so much for being here today, and take care, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Thanks, Kelsey. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Kelsey.
Thank you.